Hey there, I'm Jake the Ashen Hollow, and I hope you're all doing remarkable. If you're a fan of all video games and the stories they tell, I urge you to click the subscribe button below. So, a quick preface before we get into things. This video is certainly inspired by the upcoming mobile game Alien Blackout. My opinion on Blackout is a completely different matter, but we won't get into that. Either way, Blackout isn't technically a sequel to Alien Isolation, but it does feature the same protagonist, so it's related in that sense. But I thought it'd be neat to go over the story, and mayhaps one day we get a true Isolation sequel, but I digress. Let's jump into this thing, because my chest is starting to feel a little funny. If you haven't at the very least seen Alien, I suggest you stop watching this video immediately and go do that instead while reevaluating your entire life. I'm just kidding. But Isolation does take place between the films Alien and Aliens and follows Amanda Ripley, the daughter of the main character in the movies. As well, the game will reference things that happened in the first film. Alien Isolation starts with a voiceover from Ellen Ripley about how her ship, the Nostromo, was destroyed in order to kill an alien organism that killed her crewmates, and that she managed to board an escape pod beforehand. But that was 15 years ago, and now we see Amanda Ripley, her daughter, in the same sector the Nostromo went missing, still searching for her mother as she's met by a synthetic. An android named Samuels tells her that he works for the company, or the multinational conglomerate we know as Weyland-Yutani. He tells Ripley that the flight recorder from the Nostromo, and only clue as to what happened to her mother, has been found, and he offers her a place on the ship the USCSS Torrens heading to Sevastopol Station, a large Freeport space station, to pick it up. Samuels likely being the most empathetic android you'll meet. Aboard the ship, Ripley meets Captain Verlaine and a woman named Taylor, who is a legal executive for Weyland-Yutani, who are looking to understand what happened to the Nostromo. As the Torrens approaches Sevastopol, it appears that the station has taken some slight damage. Captain Verlaine tries to hail the station for docking orders, but receives only a very distorted reply. Without being able to dock, Amanda, Samuels, and Taylor spacesuit up to traverse to the station via a tethered cord connected to the Torrens. Of course, because bad things always happen in space, while they're making their way into the station, an explosion goes off, severing the cord and sending the three of them into space. Ripley hits the side of Sevastopol and luckily enough finds an airlock into the station, but without any sign of Samuels or Taylor. Once on board the station, Ripley sees that it's become abandoned and very run down. Something has clearly happened here. She tries to find the communication station so she can contact Samuels or Taylor. She has to avoid a small group of armed and hostile humans along the way, tipping her off even further that something just isn't right on this station. While making her way through, she gets held up at gunpoint by a single man named Axel. She tells him why and how she got here, and he goes on to tell Ripley that things aren't good on this station, as if that weren't already obvious, and that there's something here, a killer picking people who live aboard the station off one by one. Ripley propositions that Axel help her find her friends and contact the Torrens in exchange for a place on the ship when they leave, to which he agrees. While sneaking their way through the station, Axel explains that these groups of survivors aren't intentionally violent, that they're all just scared and don't know who to trust. In order to get to the comm station, they'll have to take a transit to another part of Sevastopol. Unfortunately, it's powered down, so the two of them will have to repower the console. In doing so, they attract the attention of nearby survivors, one of which begins to attack Axel. Ripley helps him with his assailant before the rest of the hostile group arrives. Ripley and Axel make a run for it and eventually lose the attackers in the chase. Unfortunately for Axel, though, an unknown entity pierces his chest from behind and drags his dead body up into the vent. Ripley panics and begins to sprint away to find the transit station. Along the way, however, she finds the flight recorder from her mother's ship, though to her misfortune the files are corrupted, and attempting to access them sets off a security lockdown alarm. She quickly begins trying to disable this alarm to avoid any unwanted attention. It's during this time, though, that Ripley fully sees the Sevastopol killer for what it truly is, an alien organism, or what we refer to as xenomorph. She hides and sneaks away from the alien threat as it stalks her through the area. She manages to escape the xenomorph through an elevator to another floor of the station where she finds a service desk ran by one of the Seegson Synthetics androids. She asks it to let her into comms control, to which it replies it cannot, and that everything is under control. So she'll have to sneak into the comms room if she has any hope of contacting her friends or ship. Ripley quickly learns that these androids have become hostile, as she's seeing one beating a man to death. She sneaks her way into the communications room, where after having to reboot the power, which sets off yet another alarm, she hears Samuel's emergency call over the radio. Ripley warns him about the alien and android threat, and he tells her that Taylor is hurt and needs medical supplies, and that he has failed to contact the Torrens because the radio isn't allowing communication outside of the station itself. Ripley sneaks back through the alarm-triggered ward and makes her way to Samuels and Taylor. She tells Samuels that she will go to the medical facility and find supplies for Taylor, and Samuels agrees to stay behind and continue trying to fix the radio. In the med bay, Ripley meets Dr. Coleman, who tells her there aren't any medical supplies here, but rather they're in the hospital down below. He tells her that in order to open the service elevator to get to the hospital, he needs a key card and a passcode. Ripley scours the offices in the med bay to find it, all while being stalked again by the xenomorph. Once she finds them, she brings them both back to Dr. Coleman, and he opens the elevator from his console. As he gets up to join her, waiting behind his door is the xenomorph that had been stalking Ripley. It drags the doctor into the dark room beyond. Ripley rushes into the elevator and descends to the hospital. She eventually finds a trauma kit while still being pursued by the alien and heads back towards the transit to get to Samuels and Taylor. Before she can, though, she runs face to face into the xenomorph, but just before the creature can strike, that good old-fashioned Ripley luck stat kicks in, and an explosion throws her to the ground and sends the alien running. Ripley escapes through the burning wreckage of the medical facility and makes it back in time to see Samuels being confronted by Marshal Waits about him directing the Torrens not to land here, and Samuels explaining that they didn't receive the call because comms outside the station aren't working. The Marshal explains how he doesn't know what the alien creature is, but that it was brought here by a man named Marlowe, the captain of the Anesidora, the ship that found the flight recorder from the Nostromo. They go to the Marshal's bureau to patch Taylor up, and the Marshal tells Ripley that Marlowe is here in a cell and won't give him the code to bring the Anesidora onto the station, which Marlowe left orbiting nearby, and that perhaps Ripley can get him to talk. She approaches Marlowe in his cell and tells him that her mother was on the Nostromo. Marlowe admits that they never found the ship, just the flight recorder, and that he is responsible for the xenomorph getting on board the Sevastopol station. He says he was a part of a salvage crew looking for the Nostromo when they picked up a distress call near its last known location. The call brought them to an unknown planet where they encounter the derelict, the same alien station we see the crew of the Nostromo enter in the Alien film. Marlowe and his crew, thinking that this is their big payday, do almost exactly what the events of the Alien movie cover. They go into the ship, mess with the eggs, people start getting face-hugged, then they fled, and Marlowe sought medical attention on Sevastopol, and the rest is history. He tells Ripley that he won't tell her anything else unless she gets him out of the cell. The Marshal interrupts and tells Ripley that he has a plan to trap the xenomorph, to which she agrees to help. She heads to the designated location where the alien begins to stalk her again. The plan is to get the alien in an isolated wing of the station and initiate a lockdown, trapping it inside. Ricardo, a guy who works within the Bureau, helps Ripley over the comms to get the lockdown going. After a few hiccups, Ripley manages to trap the alien in a lockdown sector. Before she can escape, though, the Marshal apologizes and locks her in as well. Then he detaches the sector into space, sending it plummeting towards the gas giant planet below. Ripley rushes for the airlock on the sector and throws on a spacesuit, all while avoiding the enraged xenomorph in this sector. She gets outside and manages to grab a hold of the side of Sevastopol again and climb her way back into the station. She furiously begins to head back towards the Bureau to have words with Marshal Waits when she gets a call from Ricardo, who tells her that the androids are acting even more aggressive now and are actively hunting the survivors on the station, and to be careful, and that he had no idea that the Marshal was going to do that and that he's sorry. Marshal Waits gets onto the comms and tells Ripley that he had no choice, that he saw what that thing could do and he had to protect the station. It's then that we hear the Marshal and the whole Bureau being attacked and killed by androids. When Ripley finally gets back to the Bureau, she finds everyone slaughtered except Ricardo. And Samuels, Marlowe, and Taylor aren't anywhere to be found, so she heads out to locate them again, while Ricardo stays behind in order to help Ripley. It turns out Samuels went to Seegson Synthetics to locate Apollo, which is the mainframe for the androids, and to lift the lockdown. Once Ripley gets there, Samuels tells her that the system is only operable by Seegson Synthetics androids, so he'll have to try to reconfigure the system if he wishes to get to Apollo. This plan backfires though, as Samuels gets fried trying to reformat the system. He does, however, manage to open the Apollo transit, giving Ripley the opportunity to get to Apollo. As he dies, he wishes Ripley good luck and hopes she finds her answers. Again, a super nice different breed of android. Rest well, buddy. Ricardo sends Ripley an audio recording he found of Taylor telling Marlowe that she wants the data from the derelict and the alien organism, and that she'll let him out of his cell for it. Then the commotion from the android attack is heard and the recording stops. Ripley makes her way to the Apollo core. She has to power down a conduit to make it through a cord shaft, which is the only way to the center of Apollo's mainframe. Once inside, Apollo doesn't comply with Ripley's orders to lift the lockdown and deactivate the androids. Instead, it says it's ordered to perform Special Order 936. As it turns out, Weyland-Yutani bought the Sevastopol station 2 days after the Taurans set course for it. The company then enacted Special Order 936, which put the androids in their hostile state as a means of containing the alien specimen, as they likely intend to capture and study it, and made the safety of everyone else on board secondary. Apollo says it can't downgrade the hazard containment order due to an unknown presence in the central reactor. Ripley decides to head to the reactor to see what the problem is and if it can be fixed so that the order can be lifted. As she descends into the reactor, she discovers an entire xenomorph nest filled with the alien eggs and the bodies of everyone who had previously gone missing aboard the station. Ripley decides that the only thing to do is to overload the reactor to destroy the hive. She sneaks her way through the hive, avoiding several xenomorphs, overloading each of the core's reactors. She initiates the purge, and the overloaded cores in the hive begin to scatter, though some of the xenomorphs unfortunately manage to escape back onto the station. Ricardo radios in that the purge has been resetting stations all over Sevastopol. He also tells Ripley that the Anesidora is now nearby the station, and Ripley might be able to get to it using one of the short-range ambulance shuttles, so she heads to the ambulance bay to do so. Once aboard the Anesidora, Ripley hears Marlowe talking to her over the intercom. Taylor then interrupts him and tells Ripley that Marlowe has double-crossed her. Marlowe tells Ripley to come meet him, and then reiterates how he was wrong to have brought his friends to Sevastopol and bringing the alien organisms here, that you have to wipe out every trace of them to be rid of them. While making her way to Marlowe, Ripley accesses one of the ship's terminals in which she finds the data for the flight recorder. She is finally able to hear her mother's message to her about what happened aboard the Nostromo, and how she encountered the same alien species Amanda is dealing with now, and how she destroyed the Nostromo in order to kill it. Marlowe shows up on the other side of the glass-divided room and tells Ripley that he's going to use the ship as a nuke, essentially, to take out Sevastopol Station to clear the alien threat once and for all, because the company would just keep the alien to study it, which would inevitably end up in more and more situations like the one they're in now. Marlowe begins overloading the ship before Ripley can protest, but Taylor knocks Marlowe out from behind, but not before he's finished. Ripley and Taylor attempt to manually override the fusion reactor overload, but they're not successful, and in a small explosion, Taylor is thrown to her death. Ripley rushes back to the ambulance pod she took here and heads back to Sevastopol. Ricardo radios her that the blast from the Anesidora has badly damaged the station, and that before long it will begin to plummet and crash onto the planet below, and that the Taurans is the only way out of here. Ripley doesn't know if the comm station is still down, but she desperately has to try to reach the Taurans. Ricardo patches in an incoming transmission from Captain Verlaine asking what was happening, and that the Taurans can help evacuate survivors. Ripley makes it to the comms room, but she's still unable to contact outside ships. She has to find a way to do it manually. Oh, and keep in mind, she's still being stalked by several xenomorphs. That was never off the table. Ripley scans for the Taurans' location and finds its coordinates. She then heads outside the station to manually align the radio input satellite with the Taurans' location, and is finally able to contact Captain Verlaine. She tells the captain that there's no time to explain what's happening, but that she needs to get off the station. Captain Verlaine tells her that the only way for her to get close enough to dock is if Ripley extends the tow platform. Ripley heads that way and radios Ricardo to fill him in on what's happening, but Ripley never gets a response. Unfortunately for poor Ricardo, he's met the same fate as many others aboard Sevastopol. Ripley engages the docking clamps for the Tauran and goes to the airlock for another spacesuit to get to the ship. Just before she gets there though, she's dragged through the vents by one of the xenomorphs. She awakens in what I assume is a few minutes later inside another alien hive. She wastes no time sneaking her way back to the airlock though to get aboard the Torrens, as she's running out of time and the space station is hurling towards the gas giant. Ripley finally makes it outside, that much closer to getting out of this nightmare. She clamps herself onto the outside of the Torrens hull and has to manually detach the docking clamps. And in classic horror fashion, just in the nick of time, she frees herself and the Torrens from the exploding and alien-infested station and is brought to safety inside of the ship. But not every story has a happy ending. Upon entering the Torrens and not hearing from Captain Verlaine, before Ripley can even remove her spacesuit, a xenomorph walks through the automatic door in front of her. She sprints backwards towards the airlock with the alien hot in pursuit. Just as the alien has her in its clutches, she smashes the emergency override button on the airlock, sending both her and the xenomorph out into the emptiness of space. Moments later, we see Ripley unconscious and drifting through the blackness. We then see the dim light of a ship scanning over her face, and just as she begins to open her eyes, the credits roll.
Added report. Personal message. This is for my daughter. Hi, Amanda. I'm recording this for you, my sweetheart, and I hope you get to hear it one day. You see, I got into trouble. My ship, there was an accident, sweetheart, and we found an alien creature. It was very dangerous, and the only way we could stop it was to destroy the ship. I'm okay. I'm stuck on this lifeboat, long way out, but we had to destroy the ship. We had to destroy the Nostromo. We just couldn't risk bringing that thing home with us. I needed to protect you. Don't worry. Don't worry about me. I'm sure I'll see you very soon. I love you, sweetheart.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel and clicking the bell icon for notifications. If you have a Twitter, you should give me a follow, and if you've ever wanted to support the channel even further, check out my Patreon page. The links for all of this can be found on the screen or in the description below. Peace 'em out!